What's a great approach from a security vendor? Go.
I really appreciate honesty. The industry is full of a lot of what we'll call hype. And when I have a vendor come in that gives me just the straight answers, tells me exactly what their product's capable of and not capable of, helps me understand and make a reasoned decision, and really helps me bring forward to my team members that are part of that decision-making process, the CFO, the CEO, et cetera.
It's time to begin the CISO Series podcast.
Welcome to the CISO Series podcast. My name is David Spark. I'm the producer of said CISO Series, and joining me for this episode, you've heard him before. Whether you like it or not, you're going to hear him again. Like, if you don't like it, you could just stop listening, but you do like it. Who doesn't like Mike Johnson? He's the CISO of Rivian. Say hello to the audience, Mike.
Hello, audience, and thank you for listening.
And by the way, does anyone not like you, Mike?
I don't know. I don't know that I would know. So we'll just assume that there's probably somebody somewhere out there, and I'm just not aware of it.
I'm sure I've got exes who don't like me. We're available at CISOseries.com, where we have other programming on our wonderful network. And in fact, the second season of Capture the CISO will be airing very soon after this episode. So people should be checking out that.
Yes.
And I do want to mention our awesome sponsor, a brand new sponsor with the CISO series. It is CyberMax. Think like an adversary, defend like a guardian. They do managed detection and response combined with offensive capabilities. Everything you need for stronger security. And guess what? They're responsible for our guest today. I'll introduce him in a moment. But Mike.
Yes, David.
I want to tell you about something that happened over this weekend that involved my son.
Okay.
We go to the local indoor lacrosse games here in San Diego. The San Diego team is called the Seals. Mm-hmm. And during the games, actually, we have season tickets. During the games, they have these promotional things.
Okay.
And one of the things that my son, who's 10, got a chance to do was the milk chug challenge. Him and another little boy drank a pint of milk as fast as they possibly could. And this was a long time coming. We were very excited to do this, or he was, as was I. And the other thing is he got to be on the Jumbotron while this was all happening as well. And I can proudly say, and he was very excited, and I have video of it in person and on Jumbotron, he did win the Milk Chug Challenge.
So did he train for this? You said
yes, he did. He would, at school, he would down his half pint of milk as quickly as he possibly could. And here's the part that amused me. So I met the mom of the other boy who my son was up against. And the other mom goes to me, "It's all for fun." And I'm thinking, 2 kids drinking milk as fast as they can. What else is this?
It sounds like torture, but, you know, as long as the kids are excited and they're doing it so willfully.
So here's the thing, is that it was very exciting. The whole thing was fun, and he gets a bag of prizes. Now, what we thought he was going to get in his prize was like a jersey from the team, because you often see them, they give them away to the prize. No, what did they get? They got a bag of just random pointless swag from the milk, the dairy farm, the milk company. So what did a 10-year-old boy got? A coffee mug, a to-do list notepad, and a license plate holder for the car that he can't drive at age 10.
Well, so he's preparing, because one day he'll have his coffee, he'll be able to pour milk into his coffee, and then he'll have a car and he can put a license plate on it. It makes perfect sense to me. I'm sure he was so excited for this prize pack.
Well, he already gave away the license plate holder. That's long gone. Anyways, it was a big thrill, the whole thing.
Congratulations to him.
Yes. All right, let's bring on our guest, who we were going to find out how fast he can drink a pint of milk, by the way.
Surprise.
He is the CISO over at CyberMax, our wonderful sponsor. It is none other than Aaron Shaha. Aaron, thank you so much for joining the show.
Yeah, honored to be here. Really appreciate the time.
Surprising research just in.
Since generative AI has hit the consumer level, we've seen speculation how it will be used by threat actors. Now, we have findings right from the horse's mouth with a report from Microsoft and OpenAI. They've already seen threat actors attempting to hit models with prompt injections, misusing LLMs to make malware, and to assist with fraud. Microsoft said it's committed to disrupting malicious use and will share information with the public and other AI service providers about new approaches. That transparency is a big commitment. So, how can CISOs, Mike, take advantage of this data, and how can improve your security program, if at all? What do you think, Mike?
So I'm an optimist, David.
Yes, you are. You are always the glass is half full.
I always try and find the good in everything, and I'm struggling with this one because this one feels like marketing from Microsoft. It's really strikes me as Microsoft trying to convince us that we should trust them because they're doing something. I don't know what I can do with this. Like, I don't feel like this is actionable to me as a customer of Microsoft, as a customer of OpenAI.
What do you think they're driving at?
I really think that this is trying to get ahead of all of the negative press about generative AI. And this is Microsoft saying, hey, we are looking into it. We have witnessed the attacks that everyone is speculating. We know they're out there. And so that's giving some confidence.
So they're validating. Doesn't that have value there?
Well, but there's nothing actionable for me. Like in some ways, this is, again, I appreciate that they're doing this research, but to answer your question, how can CISOs take advantage of this? I don't see a way. I don't see something that we can do with it. I appreciate their commitment to share with other generative AI vendors. And I think there's something there to help make the technology safer. But I can't do anything with this. And so I'm stuck. I don't know what to do with this.
Is this like the panic alerts we used to hear about terrorist threat levels? Like, what do we do here? Aaron, I'm throwing to you. You're nodding your head.
Yeah, I think so. That's exactly it. Totally agree with Mike. And it's probably a good yin and yang we have here where I'm a little bit more on the pessimistic side. One of the interesting things to kind of do a little bit of a takeoff on that, there are now standalone GPTs, right? We saw NVIDIA just released one that ships with their card. There's another high quality one out there called GPT for All. We're seeing kind of what we'll call next tier down players like Gab AI come in, and they're starting to produce their own AIs. So I agree that there's probably a little bit of marketing hype here. And I think the ability of the attackers to pivot and cross that digital moat that we were hoping OpenAI would give us, that ship's already sailed.
So is just Microsoft looking for some lame excuse to have more press around AI here and hopefully get some goodwill from the community? You're nodding your head, Mike?
Yeah, I think that's what this is it's an attempt at goodwill, which is fine. I don't begrudge them that, but there's just nothing actionable for the average cybersecurity person, for the average generative AI researcher, for the average generative AI user. We have to rely on Microsoft doing something. And so again, they're trying to build trust from us, but I can't do anything with this.
Are we having communication issues?
We know that security needs to operate under the aegis of the overall business, but how do you account for that in environments where the time to follow proper security could cost lives? That came up in a recent paper by Fred Hebert looking at cybersecurity in hospitals. Hebert noted ways hospital staff sidestepped security controls deemed as a hindrance to life-saving work. We often talk about staff working around security as just looking to get their job done. But this paper treated the organization from the lens of ethnography or culture. So I'm going to start with you, Aaron, here. It sounds like we need to better understand company culture and job processes to build security controls that staff will actually work through. Doesn't that just seem like security's job? And if they're not doing that, that's totally the blame of security?
I think at some level, yes. This is also really well timed. I was within the last couple of weeks, I was at a major hospital complex talking with their CISO, and we got into the CIA triad, and I asked him, okay, what are your crown jewels, right? Like, what are we trying to protect here? And he said, no, you got it backwards. We care about availability. And I had to take a step back there because my whole career I've been focused around, we got to protect those crown jewels, protect those assets. And he said, no, availability for us is first. If a major event comes in and takes out our blood donor network, for example, we're not able to ship blood around, give transfusions in the hospital and things like that. That's a catastrophic event for us. So I think this paper's onto something. I disagree that people should be trying to sidestep those. So I think I agree with your premise that as security professionals, we're probably not understanding our business context properly, and we need to take that into account.
That's a really good point that hospitals have very, very different needs than your traditional business. And that's a great point about availability. Throwing this to you, Mike, it's clear that security professionals need to understand the processes and the culture. I mean, isn't that job one?
It is, because it can lead you down this path of trying to go forward with controls that don't make sense. And
Aaron made a perfect example about availability.
right. I think that was, precisely it. And I really liked what Aaron had to say about, we talk about the CIA triad in cybersecurity, but generally folks lean heavily into the C. Sometimes talk about I. A is very rarely talked about, very rarely prioritized. It's often not even seen as a cybersecurity problem in the first place. And when you're in those environments, like the hospital that Aaron mentioned, an OT network where you've got machinery that's running a factory, availability is king. In our situation at Rivian, it is, can we keep making vehicles? In the hospital example, can we keep saving lives? If the system is down, that is really the catastrophe. Sure, they don't want to lose information. Integrity, I think in those environments, it's really the AIC triad where availability is king. Integrity really matters, because if you're giving the wrong information, that's just as bad as it not being available. Confidentiality matters, but it is the third priority. And so I think all of this does come back to understanding the business context, which we talk about on this show so much, and is especially key where lives are at stake, where human safety is at stake.
All right, let me throw this back to you, Aaron. You said availability was key. So you're running a security department, and the team has been maybe operating in a different way. They were so focused on confidentiality, like Mike was just saying. How do you shift the focus, and does it become a big shift, or is it an easy shift to go like, no, we're moving to availability, guys? Like, how does that work?
Yeah, I think that really comes down to your initial question, right? Is there a communications problem? We need to have solid communication. We need to have everybody understand, what are we in the business of, right? A lot of people just bring security principles from past lives and try and stamp them on everything. I came from the DoD, very high security there. Those things are not going to work for a manufacturing and OT plant like Rivian or in a hospital complex. It's a different paradigm. So we have to be able to adapt, be flexible, right? And then communicate with our staff to kind of bring them along that journey to help them understand what's really important here. And that's not to say confidentiality isn't important, but availability is priority one, right? So being able to adapt to that.
Who's our sponsor this week? Well, it's the awesome company that Aaron works for. It's CyberMax. Now, CyberMax helps companies assess, monitor, and manage their cyber risk. CyberMax believes that offense fuels defense. We've heard that before. We're all on board. Their next generation managed detection and response solution, or Max MDR, it strengthens your defense capabilities with insights from offensive security, hence the offense fuels defense. They have digital forensics and instant response, DFIR, and threat hunting. Now, to learn more about it, you got to go to their website. And that's cybermax.com. And CyberMax is spelled cyber, MAXX, two X's. CyberMax, you think like an adversary, but you defend like a guardian.
It's time to play What's Worse?
All right. Aaron, are you familiar with how the What's Worse game is played?
From our conversations, yes.
Yes. So it's not that difficult. Two crappy scenarios. You're not going to like either one of them, but you have to pick one. And Mike always goes first. And we have from a new listener who has not submitted 4.
Oh, great.
From John Densmore. He's with First Mutual Holding, and here are his 2 crappy scenarios, Mike. Scenario number 1. Your employees use company-issued computers, and you have them completely locked down so that malware does not stand a chance. Unfortunately, this means that your employees have to work through your overburdened and understaffed service desk for all, and I would stress all, computer changes, including, but not limited to, adding printers, creating email rules, changing desktop wallpaper, and adding applications, no matter how minor. My favorite is the changing desktop wallpaper. I'd like to see that ticket come in.
Mm-hmm.
All right. Scenario number 2. Your employees use their own computers, and you're not going to like this one, Mike, and have full admin rights on them.
Okay.
Company applications are installed on the employee BYOD computers, and there is no XDR solution in place, and VDI is not an option, virtual desktop. So, Mike, which scenario is worse?
Wow. 2 very extreme scenarios.
And they're pretty crappy.
Both suck. Both of these are terrible. And what's funny, though, is as you were walking through the first example, what I was remembering was the early days of application allow listing. You really had to be very precise with what was allowed, because the idea was if it's not allowed, it's blocked. And that meant that any little change for an inappropriately configured system required a help desk ticket. So I've seen this. Like I've actually witnessed this. It does suck.
Have you seen the desktop wallpaper change?
We basically told people they couldn't change their wallpaper because for a while, even changing your screensaver meant running an executable. This was a Windows thing. And so just what you would think would be the easiest change required a help desk ticket. So I've lived the first one.
Okay.
The second one is what I've colloquially referred to as YOLO security, like just whatever, everything goes. And it also sucks. I can say I'm fortunate that I've never lived that one. But the way that I look at these is I still have to bring it back to empowering the business. And what I'm not hearing in the first one, so I'm going to make an assumption again because it's what's worth, I'm going to make it even worse, that even if someone needs to change a business process, that requires a help desk ticket. That even if it's something that supports the business, it's going to slow the business down.
Anything that has interfaces the computer with the business, yes, you can assume that.
Right. So I'm just assuming that's the case of the first one. And so what that really means is, as a cybersecurity team in that first one, we're not supporting the business. We're actually against the business. We are fighting with them for everything. And that inevitably is going to lead to either the entire team getting fired or the business going down in flames. The second scenario sucks. It is likely to lead to a security breach. Like I'm not saying that this one is a good one.
I know. Again, the game's called What's Worse.
Exactly. But at least the business is able to operate. Like at least the business can serve its mission.
Yeah, but I argue that the first scenario, while crappy, at least the business does operate, and with some good security. Poorly, it operates and with a lot of control. But the second one could bring the business to its knees and not operate. That's the thing.
So I think maybe we're interpreting that first one differently, because I'm trying to make the first one, really, really bad, because if it's what you said,
it is bad, but it's the business moves at a snail's pace because of it. The second one, it's possible, and we got to bring Aaron in here because he's nodding his head like crazy. It's possible it could be falling apart. I just want to make sure that you're sticking with number one being the worst.
I think, again, just with the scenario that it just drags the business to a halt, I think the first one is the worst.
Okay. I don't think it's a complete halt. I think the second one could bring it to a complete halt. That's my argument. All right. Aaron, where are you on this one?
If you got to pin me down, I'm going to say the second one's worse. So if we're looking at something like a regulated industry or something, again, we have to bring our assumptions in here. The full lockdown makes sense in some cases, nuclear power plant or something like that. The Wild West scenario, while very effective for startups and small companies trying to be agile, if you're bringing that into a larger business, could have some pretty catastrophic results. from that. So if I had to choose the two, I would definitely choose the more regulated one. But I hate I hate the decision on this without more info.
We try to create a Sophie's choice each time, is what we're trying to do.
But I also think what you're hearing, David, is the differences in our backgrounds and like the assumptions that we make in these answers. So yeah, very much, as Aaron said, you have to take in the business context into account, and that's where the assumptions come in.
Yeah, and I understand the it depends there, but yes, but overall, Aaron was correct this week.
Great.
Thank you.
Please, enough. No, more.
Today's topic is managed detection and response, or MDR. We've heard this before. All right. It is actually what our fine sponsors, CyberMax, they do. And so we're going to definitely get the lowdown from Aaron here. But I'll start with you, Mike. What have you heard enough about with MDR, and what would you like to hear a lot more?
I think there's still a lot of first and I don't know if you'd call it second generation MDRs around. And a lot of them rely heavily on install this agent. Just go install this agent and everything is solved. And there's a lot of downsides to that. And so I'd really like to hear less of the just go install this agent. It's so simple to deploy. What I'd like to hear more of is how MDRs show value to a company and how they can augment, how can they act as an extension to the cybersecurity team. So it's less tool-centric, less of the tools, and I'd like to hear more of the business outcomes.
That is a really interesting point, Mike, because we have heard that a lot, because we've heard the line of, oh, if you can't hire, you get an MDR, or we've also heard the line of, no, I just going to make my current organization more powerful with your capabilities. And some people argue that it is not the first case. Like, you can't completely replace your security team with an MDR, but some argue yes. So I'm interested to know what your take is on this, Aaron, and how CyberMax operates in such an environment. So let's start with, what have you heard enough about with MDR, and what would you like to hear a lot more?
Yeah, first, Mike needs to get out of my head, because that was actually both of my answers. So what I've heard enough about is companies that, we'll say mid-market, possibly to small, large Fortune companies that think that they can create their own SOC, their own MDR practice overnight. This is a really challenging area to get into, both from the velocity, the volume of data, the technology required, the capital expenditure, not to mention bringing in your people operations to staff something 24/7. I think a lot of people really underestimate that. What I'd like to hear more about is people really understanding what it means to be an attacker and why attackers are successful. A lot of people in the industry come down to think that this is a tools problem. And to kind of summarize this, I hear about, oh, we were just attacked by Lockbit ransomware and it took out our servers. No, you weren't. You were attacked by an actor who used the tool Lockbit to attack your servers at your company that's had a human impact upon you. It's humans attacking humans, right? Means, motive, and opportunity. We need to decompose and get out of the nerd realm, right? We always want to look at this from our technology perspective, but this is really a human problem. If this was a technology problem alone, we would have solved this 30 or 40 years ago after the cuckoo's egg, and we would have locked things down, right? Now it's very much a human problem, just leveraging new and unique ways to employ tools. And you can see this from tradecraft like living off the land. It doesn't matter how much we take away. The adversary still has capabilities on our networks.
That is a really interesting take. So, excuse my ignorance, and please explain how CyberMax works here, but how do you take the human element into account for your own SOC, for working with a client, for educating them? I mean, like, explain the process here.
We have an excellent security research staff that's constantly evaluating new threats, looking at things. They just pulled up, the reason Lockbit came to mind is he grabbed the posting from Lockbit after the FBI took down, in air quotes, Lockbit over the last couple of days. And he got the posting of the Lockbit author laughing at them and saying, yeah, you got a few keys. It really didn't impact anything. And by the way, I was enjoying yacht life, on a cyber yacht. And now you guys have energized me and I'm back in the game. So One of those ways is going out and using good intelligence, good cyber research, understanding the lay of the land and kind of the motivations of the actors. The other way that I really like doing this is with purple team events. I think purple teams are very valuable. If you don't understand how an attacker works on your network and kind of some of the fundamental asymmetries between attack and defense, you're going to really have a hard time implementing defense only. Attack and defense are two sides of the same coin, and you really have to understand both to really secure your network.
Can you give me an idea of, and maybe you went through purple team exercises when you did this, but a client that didn't understand the human element, you worked with them and you got them to understand it. And where were they and where did they move to? And how was operating your SOC better, easier, done differently? Like, explain sort of like a before and after case with a client.
Yeah, this was actually with a previous company. That's my experience. I joined in November, so I haven't had this experience currently. But we were looking at building a ML AI tool in the Elastic Stack for a customer, and we were trying to understand password sprays. And the customer was looking at this and saying, okay, this is very simple, right? You just add these two rules in. And as we started to run the purple team through, we could see the attackers, they would give us just the generic fire hose, right? And blast things through, and very simple to pick up. But as the attackers evolved their tradecraft to what I would call more realistic scenarios, it became much more difficult to detect, right? And those nuances kind of came through. So by working with the purple team, we could have the attacker try something, we could have defenders look through their logs, and then we could generate the rules in ML and AI to help speed the defenders to understand what was happening on their network, right? And it was a very give and take type of development process.
So it's essentially a just-in-time education, if you will.
That's a great way to describe it.
When is the best time to do this?
How do you reprioritize paying down your technical debt? Every organization has to deal with this question. It often comes to light when needing to update end-of-life hardware, deciding when to do a systematic refresh versus a simple update to kick the can down the road. So on LinkedIn, Zach Zulius ran through how a classic 5 whys approach, and I'm a huge fan of the 5 whys approach. He says the 5 whys approach can help you fully understand the depth of your technical debt across various stakeholders to better inform your process. Mike, so when do you really create an end-of-life plan for technology? And what are the key elements of that plan?
So this was an interesting topic that, frankly, I've never thought about before. I've never really thought about planning ahead for an end of life. I guess usually I'm on the receiving end of, hey, this thing is going away all of a sudden, and now I have to panic. But I wonder, if you think of this from a maturity perspective, I think the most mature organizations would create this end of life plan as part of implementation. Like, just as you would for a critical process or system create a disaster recovery business continuity plan, you create an end of life plan. And it might be thinking about what's next. What does a future migration look like? If we need to move away from this thing, what would that look like? That would then mean you need to understand how to get your data and processes out of there. When I was at Salesforce, one of the things that we did was you could take your data out of Salesforce at any time. But the problem was companies built up processes that relied on that. And so the data was only part of it. So I think if you're thinking about an end-of-life plan, you need to think about both the data and the processes, how you would get that out.
That's a really good point.
That's how you build that plan.
I remember having to get out of a CRM system, and actually I had a problem getting data out. I actually had to hire someone manually to copy and paste stuff out. That's how bad it was.
Oh, fun.
But it wasn't too painful for that matter. Aaron, have you had this experience of dealing with end of life and maybe some good and bad stories of how you've dealt with it?
Yeah, so this is really challenging. A lot of the businesses I've dealt with in previous lives when I was doing DFIR work with Deloitte, you would see lots, and I mean lots, of very large companies go through M&A activities, things like that, where they're bringing in lots of technology from people that might not be as mature, even though they had a mature process at the acquiring company. And the plan, well, Mike's spot on, right? I mean, having that maturity plan would be great to get us through there, but sometimes that's not going to happen. And that technical debt does seem to have compound interest on it and bring it through. And that's really difficult to do, as well as some of those business processes that are kind of ingrained. We've seen legacy COBOL and AIX around there, right? And you're not dropping an EDR solution on those, right? So it kind of evolves down to what I call looking for black holes, right? The way we look for black holes in science is we look for the activity around the black hole, the light bending past it or whatever. We have to do similar things with our network defensive tuning, right, and tooling, and look for things around that, put them in a hardened enclave. But really migrating some of that technology off of those old systems is much harder than many people appreciate, and they can be around for quite some time.
I will just say personally, and again, my personal stories doesn't have nearly the hooks nor the hardware that like a hospital has to deal with the technical debt. But when you're on the other side of it, it feels a lot better. It's just getting to that other side. Mike, you're smiling.
Oh yes, because I mean it's like so many challenges, right? It's the feeling of accomplishment that comes out of it.
But the long road you feel afterwards, not just that moment.
Exactly. You might have had a vendor who was not doing what you need, or an application that was not doing what you needed. And then now you're in this bright new world where everything just works. And you've got both the moment and the ongoing feeling of satisfaction from it.
So yeah, Aaron, you're nodding your head all the way through this. Add your 2 cents here.
Yeah, I mean, when the plan comes together, it's amazing, right? Being able to age off those systems, get them off your network. I've seen so many companies, unfortunately, the majority of them, that just struggle with the planning. And part of that's people moving on, people not being at their jobs for as long as they have been in the past. And so those plans tend to disappear, evaporate, get lost, right? And before you know it, you've got a whole closet full of aging equipment that nobody knows is there. And I spoke about it earlier. That's one of those advantages that the attacker can leverage, because they have ground truth on your network. They know what's there where you might have lost it. Your IT staff might not know about it, et cetera.
Excellent point. Well, that brings us to the very end of the show, which we have fully upgraded. We have dumped all our technical debt here at the CISO series. We have old processes that have gone, but again, we are not stuck to any major physical hardware too, for that matter. So we haven't had that kind of problem. I think it's the giant physical hardware is the thing that really, really ties you down. That's the tough one. If you don't have huge physical hardware, you really don't have much to complain about.
I do think that makes a difference, but sometimes people have physical lights that keep the show on track.
That too, but also, you also brought up a very good point too, Mike, was the fact that like you're on Salesforce and you want to migrate off Salesforce, but you've got hooks into like 12 other applications. Like, well, good luck getting off. Mm-hmm. That ain't easy. All right, we come to the end of our show, and I want to thank our sponsor. That would be Aaron's company. That'd be CyberMax. Think like an adversary, defend like a guardian. They do managed detection and response. And if you heard what he was saying, they have a great approach to it as well. So they combine the offensive capabilities you need for stronger security. And Aaron, I'll let you have the very last word. Mike, any last thoughts on today's conversation?
Absolutely. Aaron, it was a pleasure meeting you and having the conversation. I always love when I get to geek out on response. Like my background is incident response, intrusion detection. So I love being able to geek out on that. So thank you for that opportunity. I also wanted to highlight a couple comments that you made. One is your example of the hospital and reminding folks that sometimes availability is king, and people need to factor that in, that is actually part of the CIA triad. So thank you for that story. But
by the way, for those who don't know, confidentiality, integrity, and availability, that's your CIA triad. Go on, Mike.
Thank you, David. The other quote that I really liked was when you had mentioned that companies were saying they were attacked by the Lockbit malware. And you were reminding that, no, you were attacked by an adversary. You were attacked by a set of humans. That was a very good way of reminding folks. So thank you for those anecdotes, those stories, those comments, and most importantly, thank you for coming on the show. It was great talking with you, Aaron.
Aaron, want to ask you please give a plug for CyberMax, anything that I have not mentioned that our audience should know. Also, I understand you are hiring as well. And by the way, let me thank you for being an awesome guest on the show. Any other thoughts?
Awesome. Thank you, gentlemen. No, it was great. So yeah, at CyberMax, this is kind of the takeaway, right? We believe it's our duty to defend against those who commit wide-scale societal disruption through cyber attacks, right? Some days we get in the grind. I'm sure Mike's seen it. And we wonder why we're here. We're essentially keeping the lights on and keeping civilization going. It's sometimes a thankless job and tough, but all of us in the security industry and us CISOs keep fighting the good fight. Visit us at cybermax2x's.com.
And you are hiring, correct?
We are hiring. Yes, thank you. Yes, sales engineers right now.
And they can reach out to you. Yes, Aaron?
Yes, or the website. Either way.
Or on LinkedIn, you're available. Yes?
Correct. Yes.
Awesome. So thanks to Mike Johnson. Thanks to Aaron Shaha, who is the CISO over at CyberMax. And thank you to our audience as well. We greatly appreciate your contributions. Get more that was a really good what's worse scenario. Get more what's worse scenarios to me as well. And we appreciate you listening to the CISO Series podcast.
That wraps up another episode. If you haven't subscribed to the podcast, please do. We have lots more shows on our website, CISOseries.com. Please join us on Fridays for our live shows, Super Cyber Friday, our virtual meetup, and Cybersecurity Headlines Week in Review. This show thrives on your input. Go to the Participate menu on our site for plenty of ways to get involved, including recording a question or a comment for the show. If you're interested in sponsoring the podcast, contact David Spark directly at david@cisoseries.com. Thank you for listening to the CISO Series podcast.